Energy Media readers, we are going to be talking today to Laura Kilcrease, who is the CEO of Alberta Innovates. She and Mark Little, the CEO of Suncor Energy, which is the largest integrated oil and gas company in Canada, they co-authored an extraordinary op-ed in the Corporate Knights magazine that came out on Monday, and it called for the oil sands to lead the Canadian energy transformation. That, as you know, readers, is quite a pivot from where we normally think of the oil and gas industry. So I'm really looking forward to this. And Laura, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, Marco.
Now, maybe we could start, just if you could give us an overview of your op-ed, please.
Well, it's really talking about the history, first of all, of the oil sands. You know, we've long since forgotten that the oil sands are not that old, 50 or so years old, and they were based on innovation of the day. And we've really not stopped innovating in the oil sands as the markets have derived and the new innovation has come to the table. Whether it was horizontal drilling or fracking or SAGD, all of these innovations, many of them we were involved in. But we shouldn't stop innovating in the oil sands. We should continue to do so. We just feel today we have an opportunity to spread our market opportunity beyond just combusting the oil and the results of that innovation, but actually to do more with it. And in fact, we believe that there may be new higher value products that we can even derive from the oil sands, such as what we call bitumen beyond combustion.
Right, and I think that's a really key point, and I've made this argument in our hydrocarbon vision, is that we don't know what the future brings for oil markets. As you said in the op-ed, we could be seeing post-pandemic disruption of demand very quickly, much quicker than we had originally expected, and moving to some, making material out of bitumen instead of sending it off to a refinery to be made into fuel is actually a way of both mitigating risk from market change and also seizing opportunity, because now you can make 2, 3, 4 times as much, turning it into carbon fiber or polymers or other things. And I would imagine if you're Mark Little, the idea of making more money from your bitumen has to be attractive.
Yes, well, I think the pandemic combined with the changing oil and gas prices was almost the perfect storm. When OPEC and Russia came together and decided that they didn't quite agree, the rest of the world felt that activity. When pandemic of COVID overlaid that, we had the demand side of oil and gas slow down. And it just seems to me if we can be less at the control of others and more in the control of ourselves by using bitumen in other ways and diversifying again our economy, why shouldn't we do so?
Now, I have to say, one of the most extraordinary things about this op-ed, and it really caught my eye, is the fact that you and Mark called for the creation of a public agency, kind of like the old Peter Lougheed AOSTRA back in the 70s. And you called on federal leadership. And I can't remember the last time in recent memory when someone in Alberta called for federal leadership on an energy issue. Can you give us the background of why you thought that was important?
Well, look, this is a really big topic. Our oil exports are one of the largest single GDP items for the whole economy. For Alberta, they're tremendously important, but for the whole of the country, they're tremendously important. And it seems to me that when AOSTRA came together, it came together at a time when people weren't necessarily believing in what AOSTRA could do. And now we look back and we just take it for granted. But it seems that it's the time that partnerships should be formed at all levels, not just between industry and government, but between all levels, so that we can actually take full advantage. So we thought this is an opportunity of a magnitude that certainly our own provincial government is very attuned to, but also the national government should be involved in, the federal government should be involved in.
I think that's a very wise strategy, Laura, because I think it's pretty clear that the federal government has every intention of meeting the Paris Climate Agreement, the targets, and the Alberta needs to be kind of aligned with those targets in order not to be penalized unduly by climate policies. And this idea of pivoting away from, at least to begin with, the fuels market to materials market, it seems to be consistent, and I can't imagine why the federal government wouldn't support it. Have you had any, you or the oil sands companies had any of those conversations with Ottawa, up to now?
Well, I can't talk for the oil sands companies, Markham, but I can say that Alberta Innovates certainly has been talking to the provincial and federal government about this. As recently as to when we could get on a plane and actually go see them. And of course, we've had some virtual talks in between. So we are talking to them about it, but we're also finding, very frankly, interest from other areas of the world that are very much engaged and looking at the very same problem and wanting to achieve a better, wholesome economic environment as well. So we're starting to get, now this information is starting to get out, we're starting to get some very interesting conversations with folks, federally and otherwise.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, everyone's eager to solve the problem of the oil sands companies. We should point out, I think, Laura, that the very thing that makes bitumen problematic as a fuel, which is its high carbon content, makes it really tremendously ideal for making a material like carbon fiber. It actually, you kind of turn it up, the disadvantage on its head, and make it a virtue. And I understand that the amount of money that, or the value that would be created by a barrel of bitumen going into carbon fiber could be as much as 4 times what it is sending it off to a refinery?
Absolutely. And of course, you just have to look at what the market size is for carbon fiber. In North America, by 2030, it's predicted to be $212 billion in North America alone. So, that's not a global market, that's a North American market. But who's got a consistent raw supply of material to develop those carbon fibers? And not just carbon fibers at the perspective of a new material from our bitumen, but also on the other side of the use of the carbon fibers that will probably go into automobiles of the day, aircraft and other such means. And those are also the users of the oil and gas. So now you can get a vehicle that's lighter, stronger, and would take less fuel to use, regardless of what type of fuel it is, electric vehicles, normal combustion vehicles. But there's a double benefit here.
Yes, exactly. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm very pleased to see that Mark Little and Suncor are taking a lead in this. You've had conversations, I'm sure, with some of the other companies, Cenovus and CNRL and Imperial Oil. These are all big companies that have their own research and development for new technologies. What are they supportive as well?
Yes, we've found them generally to all be supportive. I mean, everyone has their own priorities, right? And so everyone is at a different stage of evolution. But generally, we've talked to these groups both directly, these companies directly, and also indirectly through some of the trade associations where we work together. Things such as COSIA, areas such as CRIN, the Clean Resource Innovation Network that Joy Romero at CNRL are leading. And so, there's many different avenues here to try and make sure everyone's included and can participate at a stage that's right for their businesses.
This will be the final question, Laura, and it really is, I think, speaks to your strength in Alberta Innovates, which is why you should be a co-leader, in my opinion, of this process. And you mentioned innovation earlier. I don't think people, even in Alberta, but certainly not outside Alberta, understand how big the innovation ecosystem is in Alberta. And you mentioned a few of them already, and there are many others. And then the amount of money that the oil sands companies actually spend on on innovation. And because they generate so much revenue, they do have the financial clout to move technology forward, commercialize it quicker than might otherwise be the case. What's your take on that?
Well, you know what? The problem with innovation as a word is it's generic. And you can have innovation or technology enhancements in many different areas. But what we at Alberta Innovates do today is trying to keep our existing major businesses and industries very competitive. And for that, we bring new innovation to the table for the conventional oil and sands, agriculture, health, all kinds of areas. And in the conventional area, better diluents, better ways of getting the oil out the sands, better transportation methods, all kinds of things are really backed by new innovation as it goes forward. I even look at Suncor, the fact they're running a whole autonomous fleet up in Fort McMurray of vehicles digging up the oil sands is just amazing. And so today we're using innovation to keep the companies competitive. But as we did in the original days of Aostra, we're looking at innovation for the future where we can actually create new markets, new opportunities, and alternative forms of business. And certainly taking bitumen beyond combustion, where we can take carbon fibers, we can take precious materials such as vanadium, which is like a lithium, could be used on batteries, where we could take activated carbons for filters and other things that give us also areas of new markets and new products that meet the 2050 Accord that are clean. And even as you said, take that darn carbon and use it for something positive into a new product. That's what we're going to do. So it's innovation for today, but it's also looking at our future.
Laura, thank you very much for this. This has been fascinating, and I really want to, Energy Media will continue to cover this story. I look forward to chatting with you in the future, and good luck getting this kicked off and implemented.
Thanks, Malcolm.